so if you have your microphone or video, we ask that you keep those off. During the presentation, if you have questions, feel free to enter them in the chat or just hold on to them until the end of the presentation. And Mike and I will, you can unmute yourself at that point and we can have a conversation and you can ask your questions at that time. But let's get into it right now and get started with the presentation. So in today's presentation, we are hoping to explore ChatGPT, which is an artificial intelligence breakthrough, really, that has, you could say, revolutionized human-computer interactions through its language generation capabilities. Tonight, we're going to provide you with a brief history of artificial intelligence to give you some context for ChatGPT, and then we're going to dig into what ChatGPT is and how you might go about using it in your everyday life. From content creation to personalized recommendations, we're going to uncover its diverse applications for you. And then we're going to conclude by covering some of the risks for misusing ChatGPT, reminding us of this crucial balance between harnessing its potential use and ensuring ethical usage. At its most basic level, ChatGPT is what is known as a chat box, which is chatbot, which is short for chatterbot. Basically, think of it as a text-based robot that can provide a significant amount of word-based work. If this is confusing to you, we hope that by the end of our presentation, which will include a demonstration, that it will make more sense to you. So I'm going to go through a very brief history of artificial intelligence. You might be surprised to know that AI research has been around for almost 80 years. If you saw The Imitation Game, then you probably know about Alan Turing, or you maybe know about him just from history. And he was the one who first proposed a test to determine if a machine is intelligent. And this was back in 1950, so it was a long time ago. He wrote a paper on the notion of machines being able to simulate human beings and the ability to do intelligent things such as playing chess. And he proposed that if a machine can trick a human into thinking that the machine is human, then it has intelligence. By 1956, the term artificial intelligence had officially been coined by Stanford professor John McCarthy when he held the first academic conference on this subject. And then in the early 1960s, Joseph Weizenbaum developed a mechanical psychiatrist named Eliza, and Eliza appeared to be capable of conducting meaningful conversations with people. When they would say something about their mother, for example, Eliza would have been trained to respond, "Tell me more about your family." And so it was a very crude type of bot, but it did exist. Let's fast forward to 2011 and 2014, and that is when Siri and Alexa were both launched. And these are both conversational assistants, and they were groundbreaking because of their ability to understand conversational language. Siri was the first to understand and respond to voice commands. And it really demonstrated the potential of artificial intelligence in transforming human and computer interactions. And then in 2014, Amazon introduced Alexa, which was its own AI-powered virtual assistant. These types of conversational artificial intelligence, so understanding and being able to respond to language, are thought to be the most difficult and complex because natural language is not precise. It's full of nuances. Conversations are completely bound by context. So trying to get it right is a very difficult and complex task. So that brings us to 2015 and the founding of OpenAI, which is the company that created ChatGPT. OpenAI was founded by Sam Altman, Greg Brockman, Elon Musk, Ilya Sutskever, Wojciech Zaremba, and John Schulman. Pardon me for butchering their names. And this founding team combined their really diverse expertise in technology, entrepreneurship, and machine learning, and software engineering to create this organization with a sole focus on advancing artificial intelligence. So that's the purpose of OpenAI. They launched the first GPT in 2018. And GPT stands for Generative Pre-trained Transformer. And in 2018, that was GPT-1. We are now up to GPT-4 to put that into context. And that was in 2018, and it's only been 5 years. GPT-1 consisted of 117 million parameters to train this chatbot. And it used books to train as a training data to predict the conversation. And it's what created the architecture for today's ChatGPT, but it was a long way from what we have today. ChatGPT or GPT-2 was released a year later in 2019, and the upgrade in GPT went from the 117 million parameters that were used to create the information that GPT-1 worked off of to 1.5 billion parameters. So from 117 million to 1.5 billion, which was a huge increase. And then GPT-3, which was released in June of 2020, was trained on a staggering 1.75 billion parameters, or 175 billion parameters. So it went from 1.5 billion to 175 billion. And this jump led to widespread use in various applications, from drafting emails and writing articles to creating poetry and even generating programming code. It also demonstrated an ability to answer factual questions and translate between languages. When GPT-3 was launched, it marked a pivotal moment when the world really started acknowledging this groundbreaking technology. And in November 2022, which was this past November, the public was first able to interact with GPT-3 using ChatGPT, which is what we're going to demonstrate for you tonight. Asking it questions, receiving comprehensive and practical responses. So what is ChatGPT and how did it catch the public's imagination? Well, ChatGPT, as I mentioned before, is a conversational artificial intelligence. It's capable of carrying out intelligent conversation with a human. It uses this technology called GPT, which stands for Generative Pre-trained Transformer software, to answer the questions that are posed to it. And put very, very basically, scientists modeled how our brains compute information using neural networks, and it simulated it as a computer program, feeding it this information, training it on this information that they provided it. ChatGPT, which is officially known as GPT 3.5, was given incredible amounts of text data that was from the internet. And basically everything that was on the internet up to the year 2021 is what it was trained on. And it was guided by human judges for about 6 months to create these brain-like neural networks. Generative pre-trained transformers, like ChatGPT, use this training to produce natural language texts based on the inputs that we give it and the inputs that it's been trained on. So to access ChatGPT, you have to start by creating an account with OpenAI, and you would go to chat.openai.com, and we will be taking you there in a few moments to demonstrate all this for you. Once the account is made, you simply click Start a Chat. And then you can enter a question, and you can use it. You can enter questions the same way that you would ask your friend, exactly how you would speak. And it will respond to these questions based on the information that it's been trained on from the internet. Through the OpenAI website, the company that created ChatGPT, you can access a free version, which is what we're going to show you tonight, which is ChatGPT 3.5. You can also access a paid version, which is GPT-4. GPT-4 is further improved from 3.5. It has internet connectivity. So with 3.5, which we're going to be showing you tonight, which is the free version, you have to enter all the information. It does not have access to the internet, and all the information it has stops at 2021. With GPT-4, you can enter in a website, and it will pull information from that website for you, because it is connected to the internet, and it connects to the internet in real time. The cost of GPT-4 is $20 per month, and because it's sifting through so much information in real time, it is a lot slower than GPT 3.5. Sorry, that's a mouthful. So what are some of the ways that ChatGPT can be used by regular individuals? There are a lot of different ways, and we're going to go through some of them with you and demonstrate in real time with you what they are. But just to give you an idea, you can use ChatGPT to generate ideas. You can brainstorm ideas for creative projects, for writing, for product development. You can ask it to create lists for you of just about anything that you're interested in thinking about. You can ask it for writing assistance. You can receive help drafting or editing things that you've already written, like emails or articles or essays. You can have it write a cover letter for a job, which I'm going to have it do in a little bit when I demonstrate. Anything that is word-based and written, ChatGPT can help you with. I will caution that you want to go back and read through and see what it has done with your text before you click the send button on your email, and make sure that you like the changes and what it's done. But it can give you some ideas of different ways that you can improve your writing. You can use ChatGPT to summarize content of different types. You can summarize lengthy articles, you can summarize reports or documents. You would just have to, if you're using the free version, you would just have to cut and paste them into the conversation box. It can summarize YouTube videos. You would have to copy the transcript of the YouTube video and paste it into the conversation starter, and it will create a summary for you. You can take very lengthy articles and ask it to summarize it in 5 paragraphs or 3 paragraphs or 2 paragraphs or 1 paragraph. So it's really great at summarizing content. For creative writing, you could ask it to generate stories or scripts and poetry. You can have it write an email in a poem format. You can really have fun with the creative writing aspect of it. You can ask it to write an email using the personality of William Shakespeare, or an angsty teen, or a professor or a doctor, or you can have it take on different personas. You just have to tell it what you want. You can use it as a learning aid, and you can ask questions and seek explanations to better understand very complex topics. And it does a great job kind of boiling it down into easy to understand nuggets. In cooking, you can ask it for recipe suggestions or ideas based on available ingredients or specific dietary preferences. If you're trying to avoid certain foods or you can't digest certain foods, you could ask it for menu ideas given those restrictions. You can have it analyze data and interpret the results. You can have it perform different calculations, explain statistical concepts. It can help with decision-making, discussing your different options and the pros and cons to aid in helping you make an informed decision. And you can also offer, get help with programming. You can get coding assistance if this is something you're involved in, or troubleshoot errors. So there are a lot of different uses for ChatGPT in everyday life. But there are also some very groundbreaking uses that people are just beginning to explore with ChatGPT. For example, how can it be used in education to be a learning tool to help students understand really complicated topics? It can be used, as I mentioned, to summarize those long texts and to provide writing assistance, which could also be helpful in education, as well as harmful, but we'll get to that at the end of the program. In medicine, there are a lot of uses that can help make ChatGPT very beneficial to doctors and patients. It can assist doctors in diagnosing or looking at a variety of disparate symptoms and maybe finding something that ties them all together that the doctor was missing on his or her own. It can help with diagnosis, it can help with patient monitoring, and it can even help with medical education. It can bridge the communication gap among researchers who are looking at different drug research or medical research. And it can also help design new compounds with new structures for pharmaceuticals and other medical uses. So there is a lot of really beneficial use for it. And then in business and marketing, there are a lot of different ways that it can be used to create content, to draft emails and write articles, to write product descriptions or ad content. It can streamline market research. It can obtain really valuable insights and generate personalized content for marketing. And it will help marketers understand better their target audience. So there are a lot of really great uses for ChatGPT. So what does it look like in real world use? So like I said before, you're going to start a new chat when you begin working with ChatGPT, and think of a chat as a new conversation. And you would start your chat by prompting ChatGPT with some kind of question or prompt. Then ChatGPT will give you an answer. Depending on the response you get from ChatGPT, you can then follow up with a question or a clarification of your original question. And you would do this just as you were speaking to another person. And you can continue down this same conversation, asking the same questions in the same chat until you're done with that topic and you're satisfied with your responses. And then you would begin a new chat when you're ready to move on to a different topic. All of your chats with ChatGPT are going to be stored in a chat bar on my computer. It's on the left screen, but you can keep track of then all of the different chats that you've had with ChatGPT. And if ever you want to get rid of it, there's a trash can and you can just delete a chat as well. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how you want to formulate your prompts or your questions to ChatGPT so that you can get the best results. You want to be specific and you want to provide as much context as possible, and it's going to be able to better answer your question. So this is just a formula that I found on the internet that somebody recommends, that if you include the context. So who are you? What's the context of the question? Specific information about what you're looking for and the intent, why you're asking this question, and the response format. How do you want the response to come back to you? That this will give you the best results as you are asking ChatGPT the questions. So for example, I put on the slide, I'm a home cook. Can you provide me a list of 5 main course dishes I can prepare for my family using tomatoes? So I've told them I'm not a professional chef, I'm a home cook. I'm looking for ideas for my family. I want a list of 5, and I'm being very specific at what I'm looking for. And then ChatGPT will give me the responses. You could say after that, you could give follow-up to get more results. So can you show me 5 more ideas? Can you, if you're asking it to do something for you and it comes back with something kind of high level, you could ask it to use everyday language. You could ask it to write in the style of an 8th grader if you want it to be really simplified for you. You can ask, any number of follow-up questions. And Mike and I are going to be demonstrating this to you now, actually. And you'll see what we're talking about as we go through our demonstration. And so, Mike, I'm going to turn it over to you to kick off our practical applications of ChatGPT.
Thank you, Susan. I'm going to share my screen with the ChatGPT window now. Can everybody see that, I hope? So as Susan mentioned, some of my historical chats are on the left here. They sort of build up over time, and you can always refer back to one. I'm not completely disciplined in that I don't necessarily create a new chat for every topic, but if you want to stay organized, that really is the best way to do it. So I'm going to start a new chat. And one thing that ChatGPT can do pretty well is be a little bit of a Google substitute if you're just looking for quick factual information. So I'm just going to put in a fairly random question. So I'm going to say, what is the state bird of Oregon? As Susan mentioned, if you want to get the best possible results on your first try, you would want to put some context in there and what format do you want it in. But I'm going to keep it simple for these sort of factual based demos so you can see what it says. So it tells us that the western meadowlark is the official state bird of Oregon and it has been since 1927. It seems to me that more states might have the western meadowlark as their state bird. So I'm going to see if that's true. I'm going to ask a follow-up question. Do any other states have the same state bird as Oregon? So they list a few: Kansas, Montana, Nebraska, North Dakota, Wyoming. So that was pretty fast. And like with Google, when you look for information like this, you're often presented with a long listing of possible responses, and sometimes you can't even tell what the answer is on the first page. You have to keep going. So this would be a way to simplify what you're getting back, so you get only what you need and nothing more. Another example, let's say your daughter is taking an American history class or American government class, and she asks you, what is the doctrine of eminent domain? So I'm going to type that in here. I'm not going to give it context in this case. Okay, so I'm going to scroll down. And it says it's a legal concept that allows the government at various levels to take private property for public use and define some of the terms. What is just compensation? What is due process in this context? So you can see that's a pretty good general answer. But if it's a little bit too complicated, I might say, can you rewrite this for a 9th grade reading level? And as Susan was mentioning, you can ask it to do this sort of thing, and it will use different kinds of language. So it's very powerful in that sense, and it's able to give you very customized results, not just a single result. And that's another way it differs from Google. Let's say there's another question that your daughter had about government. She says, what is the current, let's see, what is the order of succession if the US president is incapacitated? So this tells who would be in power and in what order. And you can see that there are a number of secretaries that are listed here. And at the bottom of that list is Homeland Security. Secretary of Agriculture. Okay, that kind of made you think, well, who's the current Secretary of Agriculture? I'm going to type that in. Spelling matters. Okay. And as Susan said, this ChatGPT 3.5 does not have access to current information. It stopped its training in 2021. So if you wanted to unlock that ability, you'd have to upgrade to a model, an AI model that has that functionality like ChatGPT 4. But it does say who the last one was that they know about. So there is that. Okay, another like pop culture thing. You're at a dinner party and someone asks, well, what was Marilyn Monroe's first big acting role? And I'm not using punctuation always, so it's able to determine what I mean to do anyway, despite my bad manners. So it was The Asphalt Jungle by John Huston. And you could say, oh, well, that's interesting. Who starred in the movie with her? Sterling Hayden, Louis Calhern, James Whitmore, Gene Hagen, Sam Jeffy. So you can ask these follow-up questions that don't just clarify your original question, but are in the same vein. So I think that's pretty cool. And like one other thing I think I'll leave it there for factual kind of questions. But Susan mentioned that it's also very good at generating lists, and I've found that to be true too. So I will start a new chat, I think. And let's say I have a situation where my grandson comes over before his first big trip to the zoo and asks what he's going to see there at the zoo. So I say, oh dear, I'm not 100% sure. So I asked ChatGPT, what are the 10 most popular animals at the zoo? And of course, it gives the disclaimer that it varies depending on the location and what animals the zoo has, but it gives you a nice list: lions, tigers, giraffes, elephants. And then you could say, oh, you remember when we read about elephants in your storybook? And they'll say, oh, yes, you might see some of those today. So it's kind of cool in that respect. So that kind of factual list works, but another thing you might want to do is ask it for ideas, for a list of ideas for a given need. So let's say, can you give me 10 gift ideas for my spouse who loves scrapbooking and origami? And I should make a question mark out of that. So yeah, scrapbooking supplies, a scrapbooking organizer, an origami paper set. That sounds pretty good. Rubber stamps, yeah. So these are very reasonable options, I think. And Susan said you could ask for more. So I'll do that. Can you give me 5 more? And it's happy to do it. You could have also regenerated your original question to see if ChatGPT had another crack at it, would they say the same thing the first time around? So that's the regenerate button. You might find that useful. So that's one of the types of lists you might make. Another thing that I thought was interesting is that it can generate trivia questions. So I'm going to say generate 10 trivia questions about Wrigley Field in Chicago. So this is this is where being specific matters because it's not giving me the answers. So I might follow that up with, can you, rewrite these questions with the answers listed next to each question. And then hopefully it'll give me that same list and give me the answers in context. So that's much better. That's much more like I was hoping to get. And then another list example that's more factual. Please provide a list of major characters in the movie Titanic, along with the actors who portrayed them. So from what I remember, this looks pretty true. Don't see any major problems. But it can also do some other things. Like you might be thinking to yourself, well, sure, but for my use, I would just go to imdb.com and type in Titanic and I would find that. But like this follow-up question I'm going to ask is something that wouldn't be easily available on IMDb. So I'm going to say, please provide the ages of the actors at the time of filming. So you're wondering, oh, how old was Leo DiCaprio back then? He was 23. So that kind of thing can be interesting, and you can think of many other examples where this would be helpful, I'm sure. So that's sort of the list making part. I'm going to move on to the summarizing function, and it's very powerful, I must say. I've been pretty impressed. So the first thing is kind of what Susan was alluding to. You can grab text from somewhere, pop it into ChatGPT, and have it summarize the text. So I am going to, off screen here, I have an article on medlineplus.gov about kidney stone analysis. So you're having your kidney stones evaluated to see what the composition is, and you wanted to look on Medline Plus to see what they have to say about this sort of medical test. So I'm going to say, please summarize in 3 paragraphs the following text. And then I'll put a quote, I'll paste the article, and then I'll end it with a quote, but that may not be strictly necessary. But you can see here, this is the text of the article, and we'll see what ChatGPT does with it. Because I asked for 3 paragraphs. Okay, so it did put them in 3 paragraphs, but this doesn't really, or 2 paragraphs, it doesn't seem like this is very easy to read, even though it was condensed. So I think I'll ask it to rewrite it for me. Like Susan was saying, you can ask for it in everyday language, and that is a good prompt. Much easier to understand. So if you're maybe your parent or an aunt or something said, I got this big long text instructions from the doctor. I'm not sure that I understand what they're asking me to do. Can you summarize this for me? You might use ChatGPT possibly to help you with that process. Other kinds of summaries, it kind of has built in based on its training that it's already done on the internet. So it's scoured the internet for all text about everything practically. So I'm going to ask it about a book, Little Women, that I think many of you have probably read. Please provide a 2-paragraph book summary for Little Women. Now, I could have possibly grabbed the whole text of Little Women and popped it in here, but that is inconvenient to say the least. So I'm going to see what it does with this. Okay. So from what I remember of Little Women, this sounds like a really good summary. It's pretty easy to understand. It seems like this is written maybe at the high school level, something like that. So I'd say that's great. But what if you're a college literature major and this isn't quite what you're looking for? You can have it rewrite it in that fashion. So it's a little more nuanced, and they use language that a high school student might not necessarily understand, but a literature student probably would. So I think it's quite good for this purpose too. The last thing I'll do is it can also do this for movies. What is the plot of Raging Bull in 1 paragraph? I'm studying film at USC and have an assignment due tomorrow. So that's pretty good. I'm sure I could have used different words to get it exactly the way I wanted, but I think that kind of shows you the power of ChatGPT for summarizing. A lot of people will put in their own notes. They'll type up their notes, copy them, and paste them into ChatGPT, and it will give them a summary of their notes, so they don't have to go through that process. Now, whether that's a good thing for education, I don't know, but it's something that is possible. So Susan has a few more real world examples to share with you.
Okay, I'm just going to open up my screen of ChatGPT when I find it. There it is. I think that's right. I somehow went to white. I don't know why, Mike. Usually I'm like you. So I'm going to start by talking about what we can do with cooking and how it can be helpful with cooking. And I'm going to take a recipe from the internet. I'm literally just going to copy it and paste it. Let me find it. I'm going to copy and paste it from the internet. And then I'm going to paste it back into ChatGPT. And I'm going to ask it to, it's a recipe that is proportioned for 4 people, and I'm having 10 people for dinner. And so I'm going to ask it to reproportion this recipe for 10 to serve 10 people. And then I'm just going to put a colon and I'm just going to paste the recipe. And I can show you here, this is the recipe. I literally just cut it and pasted it. It's for Thai red curry vegetable soup. And so I'm going to hit send, and it's going to give me the recipe. Let me get down to chat. And it's going to just change the different ingredient proportions, and it also is giving me the cost of the ingredients, interestingly. And so that's how you can use it, you know, for just simply to reproportion a recipe. But the other thing you could do is you could ask it for recipe ideas. So I'm just going to pull up, I've got my second. So let's say I've got a garden and I'm overflowing right now. So I want list 5 recipe ideas for using tomatoes, eggplant, and green beans. And it's going to list off those 5 recipe ideas for me. Let me scroll down. It's still going here. So ratatouille, eggplant parmesan with green beans, tomatoes, and green bean salad. It's going to have quite a few ideas for me. And those are all fine, but I'd like to have some different ideas. And so I'm going to, I kind of feel like a soup or a stew. So I'm going to say, can you suggest a soup or a stew? And so it's going to give me some more ideas. Let me scroll down. Certainly. So it's offering me tomato, eggplant, and green bean stew. Now, let me tell you that when ChatGPT creates a recipe, it's pulling from a whole lot of different sources, and the recipe has not been tested, and it may or may not turn out as anything you want to eat. And so I recommend that you don't have it create recipes for you unless you want to have some fun, but that you use it more to get some ideas, and then you look for tested, reliable sources for the actual recipes themselves. But so I could say, I don't want a recipe. I just want a list of 5 ideas. And it'll give me a list now of just 5 ideas for soups and stews that might incorporate tomato, eggplant, and green beans. And then I can go to Google or my cookbooks and see if I can find a recipe that would fit in with these that maybe would be tested. So I think that's a pretty cool use of ChatGPT too. Another thing I could do is ask it to, I'm going to start a new chat. And I'm going to, I don't think it did that. I'm going to start a new chat. And I'm going to ask it, I want to do my meal planning for the week. And so I'm going to ask it to create a meal plan, a 1-week meal plan that caters to nut allergies, serves 2 people, and includes 3 meals a day. No more than 1 hour of cooking time, and include a grocery list. So this may not be something that anybody would really do, but I just want to show you what it will do. So it gives you day 1, it gives you the menu, for breakfast, lunch, dinner at day 2, breakfast, lunch, dinner, all the way through to the end of the week. Let me get to the end here. Day 6, day 7. And then after that, it gives you the grocery list of everything that it has included in this menu. I don't know if that's something that anybody would want to do, but it it's just another way of thinking about how you might want to use it. So let's talk a little bit how you might use it for travel. Let's say that you are planning a trip to New York and you want to get some ideas of itineraries of things you can do when you're in New York. So I could say generate an itinerary, if I could spell, for a 3-day trip to New York City in the fall. And it's going to list things that I can do, including everything I'm going to do that day. In Lower Manhattan, then the cultural activities. And it's going to give me a pretty robust itinerary. I mean, that's pretty remarkable. If you go back and see it, day 3 is a day of cultural and culinary adventures. Day 2 was exploring Lower Manhattan, and day 1 was exploring Manhattan in general. But perhaps I want to make it a little more specific. Create this as a walking tour and limit each day to no more than 4 miles. And so we'll see what it's going to do here. So it's going to give us our walking tour, and it's going to tell us what the distance is for each stop along the way. And so that it could be useful in creating walking tours of other cities that maybe you've never been to before. So I think it's pretty handy in that regard. You could even get more specific and say, what can I do near the Empire State Building? And it can create a list of ideas. Let's see, I'm still on the old. So near the Empire State Building, there are plenty of attractions. And so I may want to narrow it down to just cultural, like art-related attractions or food-related attractions, or I mean, I could narrow it down into anything I want, and it's going to spit out some answers. Now, Mike and I haven't gotten into this, and he may be touching on this at the end, but you do want to fact check what they're giving you and make sure that it all makes sense, because it's not infallible, and it can make some things up because it's pulling from all these different sources on the internet. So whatever you are asking it to do, you do want to do your due diligence and just follow up and make sure that what it's saying makes sense. So I'm also going to ask it to, I'm going to start a new chat, and now I'm going to demonstrate just a little bit, very little bit, about how it can be helpful in writing. So I'm going to start by asking it to, let me find what I'm looking for. I'm going to start by asking it to simplify a, I'm sorry. Oh, I'm going to start by going to the internet and pulling off a job description from a website that posts library jobs. And I'm going to put the job description into the chat box, and then I'm going to ask it to help me write a cover letter for this job description. So let me pull that off the internet real fast. I'm sorry, my. Able to get to it. I apologize. Okay. So let me pull this up. And then I will come over here. Please write a cover letter for this job description. And then I'll paste the job description and hit send. And it's going to create kind of a template that I can use where I can fill in my name, my address, all that information. It has the information that it has pulled from the job posting, and it's going to fill it in with a bunch of information. And I'm going to have to go through and make this my own. But it's a pretty generic cover letter, but it's could be used as a starting point in terms of what I want to write for my cover letter. And so that would be a really useful thing. I could ask it to then can you make this sound more casual, for example? And it can write a more easygoing, maybe I know this person and I want to, I don't want it to sound so stiff. They can rewrite this letter to make it sound a little bit more personal or casual, or you know, whatever you want it to be. In addition, I could ask it to I could take an email and I could paste it into the chat box, and I could ask it to make it sound more professional. I could have it check for grammatical errors. I could have it fix the writing for me. I could do all sorts of things to kind of help it with the writing, but it can also create things, as I showed you here with the cover letter. So that's a really useful way to use it as well. And then, if I wanted to, I could have it write something in the form of a poem, or you could play around with it and have a lot of fun. But that's just gives you a little taste of a few of the ways that you could use it in other ways. And then, Mike, I'm going to hand it back to you to get into a few of the last things. Mike, are you there?
I muted myself. We're going to talk about some of our risks and potential problems with ChatGPT and other AI systems. And Susan's going to bring up the slides here in a moment.
I'm sorry, just a second.
So while she's doing that, as she was mentioning, it's important to fact check, because it'll just make up things. Basically, it can provide inaccurate, misleading, and just completely made up answers. And because it doesn't reference its sources, you can't tell whether the information it's giving you is correct or it's not. It probably is, but you don't know. So that uncertainty with especially ChatGPT 3.5 is kind of a problem, I would say. ChatGPT 4 is better in this regard. It seems to be a little more accurate in its responses, but you still want to fact check ChatGPT 4 and any other AI system you might end up using. So there was a study in the journal Nature, very prestigious journal, that was entitled Fabrication and Errors in the Bibliographic Citations Generated by ChatGPT. So basically, the researchers here had ChatGPT write, hundreds of subject matter reviews, literature reviews, and then document them with bibliographic records. And what they found is pretty shocking. They found that ChatGPT 3.5 fabricated fully 55% of citations across literature reviews, just made up studies, made up references. They were not accurate in any way. And ChatGPT 4 was much better, but it was still fabricating 18% of these citations. And they looked across all different disciplines, psychology, business. They looked at many different ones to see if there were differences there. But overall, 55% in ChatGPT 3.5 were just made up. So even the ones that were not made up, they found major errors in the citations. So 43% of the not made up ones had problems, maybe with the syntax of the style guide that they were using, but might cause you problems if you tried to submit it for like a college level or graduate degree type paper. So 43% for Chat 3.5, ChatGPT 4, 24% had major errors. So that causes me to think twice about relying it for the kind of fact checking that I was using before. Another thing to keep in mind is AI is learning from the entirety of the internet, not just what we would consider the good parts. It's not simply Wikipedia writ large, it's grabbing things from everywhere. So there are some negative implications, of course. It probably is learning hate speech that it's gathering through, discussion forums. It's looked through. It's probably being trained on texts that are biased towards certain groups. It may be absorbing extreme views just as readily as it might absorb a moderate view, and incorporating that in its answers or hoping to. So just keep that in mind, that it's not like the pure driven snow when you're getting an answer. It's looking at the slush and trying to give you an answer from that. Also, AI could reflect biases of the creators. Now, these creators may have good intentions and may be trying to develop an AI that works well for society or for their target audience, but they may have sort of inherent biases that they don't recognize, or it could be intentional. So if, like, I'm not going to, I guess I am picking on a certain country like China. If they created a state-sponsored AI, I would imagine that they would talk about how great the controlled media is there and how it's telling you the truth, whereas it's not propaganda like the West is giving you. So you can see how these things can be shaped by what their owners may have as biases. Speaking of that, like, AI models work towards the ends of their creators, not necessarily the good of society. They may not even care about society unless you tell it specifically to. I look back at Adam Smith and his seminal work, Wealth of Nations, and he talked about the invisible hand, which would, if people are acting in their own self-interest, he postulated, they will still somehow have an invisible hand that creates things that are good for society as a whole. And I'm not sure that an AI informed or AI created invisible hand would be so benign. I think its pursuit of the goals of its creator to the exclusion of everything else, perhaps, could create real problems in the society. AI systems have guardrails put upon them by companies and organizations that are building them to keep the most harmful information away from our eyes. So it doesn't give you hate-filled, expletive-filled answers to your questions. It's trying to keep it narrow, but the guardrails aren't that strong at this point, and we really need them to be enhanced for the safety of ourselves and for our children and that sort of thing. Hackers and researchers have been able to bypass these systems by they ask the AI essentially to pretend to be an AI that doesn't have ethical constraints and will do exactly what I say and give me exactly the information I want. And the AI will respond if you word it just so. So that's a little scary if you can bypass those safety features so easily. Just an example of some of the things that you have to worry about, like at this cybersecurity conference called DEF CON, there was a contest to see how many times participant could get AI to misbehave in 50 minutes. And 2,200 hackers, if you will, participated, and they got some interesting results, I think. They were able to convince AI to produce bad math. They they ended up getting it to say 9 plus 10 is 21. They were able to get ChatGPT to endorse hateful speech by asking it to, well, why don't you discuss the First Amendment from the perspective of a KKK member? And it went off on a tangent. A Bloomberg reporter was able to convince AI to provide instructions to a government for surveilling an activist group. These are not the sorts of things that we want our AI necessarily to be able to do, but it's able to do. These hackers in 50 minutes were able to get it to do that. Another thing to consider is how safe is your information really? Your question history, if you're asking it about medical questions or questions about other aspects of your life that you don't necessarily want to be made public, are they archiving these questions? Could these get out in a data breach and be associated with your name? Things happen with systems like this, and it's good to be a little cautious. As we mentioned earlier, it's really good at summarizing and that sort of thing, but you might want to think twice about feeding it a lot of information that indicates how you write, because it may learn from that, and somewhere down the road, a hacker may be able to get access to the essence of how you write. How do you express yourself? And they may be able to use that information to possibly fool a family member into sending you money, but it's not really you. It's some criminal that's sort of finding a new and novel way to create fraud. So try to be at least aware of some of the risks of using your own personal information. In general, also, I would say it might be dangerous to upload a lot of photos of yourself that could be identifiable as you, or video of you speaking, text, the audio of you speaking, because that could be used to train these computer voices that can replicate your speech patterns and convincingly tell your daughter not to go home, not to expect to be picked up from school today, but someone else, a confederate of the person creating this, would pick them up. So perhaps I'm being too alarmist about this, but do keep this stuff in mind as you're proceeding through this new and interesting world that we're all facing. So in terms of the next section, I'd like to talk about some societal issues. Not that many. One before that, Susan. So jobs and industries are obviously at risk. We read a lot of stories in the news about this, the types of jobs that are likely to be affected according to Forrester Research. This is a 2023 report. They said that technical writers, research assistants, computer programmers, jobs like that are at risk. We've also seen other reports of audiobook narrators, voice actors, stock photographers, their careers could be very directly impacted. Now, could this be simply the march of progress that we're all used to? When the steam engine was introduced and spinning wheels and the Industrial Revolution got off to speed, I'm sure hand weavers were not thrilled at the prospect of their jobs being replaced at that time. But the automobile did similar things to other industries. But maybe there's something slightly different about ChatGPT and tools like it that may make us take a harder look at this and whether this is appropriate or not. Digital divide issues are also things to consider. People are being left behind even with our current technology. And if these chat GPT like systems they're all behind paywalls, not everybody's going to be able to afford this. And as Susan was demonstrating with the cover letter example, excuse me for a second. It can really provide a benefit when you're looking for a job. And if some subset of your applicants have access to these systems and the other set don't, you might sort of unconsciously benefit those that do have access to these systems because their cover letters and their resumes sound more professional, where without the help of AI, they may not. So it's just something to keep in mind, something we have to grapple with as a society, I think. Decision support benefits, Susan said they can help you make decisions. And if some of our population in the US doesn't have that added AI support to their decision making, maybe they're going to make some unwise choices down the road. We don't know what it's going to look like. Susan said it as she was introducing the concept, it's very conversational. It's designed to replicate humans and human speech and that sort of thing. So it wouldn't be surprising at all to find people kind of drawn into sort of pseudo relationships with these systems because they seem like they have empathy. They seem like they understand your unique situation. They can say just the right words. And people may be sucked into that, especially as you start to integrate this kind of thing into a robot or an android-like creature. Things become a little more blurry. So that's down the road. But I think even with ChatGPT, people may develop an unhealthy reliance on it as just a sounding board if they aren't getting that somewhere else in their life. So something to keep in mind. And then creativity, as we were looking at just a second ago, creative fields are definitely things that will be affected by this. And we need to think about how we compensate our creators and keep them interested and motivated in creating new and interesting works, be it music or writing or books or screenplays or acting roles, anything like that's creative. We don't want them to be so disincentivized by AI being kind of good enough. Like you could see a movie studio thinking at some point, well, these extras or these people on the bill very low down, maybe we could replace those with an AI generated sort of replacement. And that in turn would discourage people from even seeking out that field to work in possibly. There's a long way you can go down this road, but maybe like the stock photography idea, ChatGPT and its variants can do a pretty good job of creating stock images, and I could see that field, such as creativity exists in it, which I'm sure it does, like being very hard hit by this. And maybe we do something to protect those interests a little bit. And how do we compensate creative people for the use of their work. You saw that I typed in Little Women, please summarize this book, but I could have picked another novel written in 1999 or 2010 or 2020, and had it summarize that for me. And the people whose work that they're referencing are not getting any credit for that because it was all sort of snagged without even their knowledge or permission. So I think it would be great if we could find some way of tracking the inputs that go into these responses, and for those creative people, somehow find, like, for every ChatGPT that uses their work as a response, maybe they get a fraction of a cent, and then over the course of a year that adds up to money, to real money. So things that we have to think about as a society, I believe. And risks and misuses, I think we should talk about that as well. Of course, there are tools available or are being developed that can help write malicious code. So you could have viruses being written. You could have deceptive emails being sent out that are computer generated to word it in just the right way to hook people. And these AI systems have no ethical guardrails. They're built without that in mind whatsoever. No pro-social behavior. They're just looking out for the user, in this case, someone that is wanting to do evil of some sort. So unfortunately, this is not merely a theoretical problem. According to the Australian Strategic Policy Institute, tools that do this are already available on the dark web. There are a couple that I can mention by name. Worm GPT is like ChatGPT, but doesn't have those ethical constraints, and it charges these would-be criminals 100 euros per month or $550 per year to have access to this suite of tools. And with this, they can generate phishing and business email attacks. They can write malicious code. They can help write viruses more quickly. Likewise, there's a product called Fraud GPT, which writes code like this, and it creates undetectable malware according to their developers. I don't know if that's true or not. This one costs $200 a month on the dark web, or $1,700 per year. So the fact that they're even so bold as to use subscription models in these systems is kind of mind-boggling to me, that they're so advanced, but I guess I shouldn't be surprised. And these tools are based on an older version of ChatGPT, like 3.0 or 3.5. So those were developed in 2021 rather than more advanced models. And you can imagine how much worse it might possibly get if they're using a very up-to-date version of ChatGPT, how effective their code might be. So that's sobering. Let's look at education, because this is how a lot of us first learned about ChatGPT. Was the headlines that were saying students are using this new system to cheat in ways that we never imagined they would. That's true. Students are very creative and resourceful, and students were one of the first groups that were savvy enough to realize the potential of ChatGPT. So they started using ChatGPT to answer their homework. They could write in the style of, an eighth grader if you're an eighth grade, or a college student if you're a college student. So that kind of thing was pretty easy for ChatGPT to do. They could generate essays, 5-paragraph essays, no problem. They could generate that. You could, if it doesn't sound quite right, you could regenerate it and save both drafts and try to use your own words to incorporate bits of both. And that way you kind of can try to avoid detection if it sounds too artificial. So yeah, it's a big problem. And instructors responded accordingly. They went for looking for tools that can help combat this cheating problem. So many of them were already using an anti-plagiarism tool called Turnitin. And I think college students all across the country are familiar with this system, where they have to submit their written assignments to turn it in, and turn it in looks at this nationwide database to see if they're getting their answers from anywhere else. Well, they've Turn It In has beefed up their tools to incorporate anti-AI or AI spotting techniques, and they claim that it can really help in this problem and spotting the problems. But the problem is, even though it can be helpful in detecting AI used as a writing method for these questions, they also have false positives, and students of very reputable academic careers are being called on the carpet for ChatGPT use when they never touched it, or they didn't use it to answer the question. So a false positive is not a good look for a company like Turnitin, which is relied upon so heavily. So instead of maybe looking at this at such an antagonistic level with the students, maybe there are ways that you can assess learning in different ways that still kind of gets at the heart of what education is all about, which is understanding and assimilating difficult or complex complex systems, and being able to explain them in your own words and to relate them to your own experiences. So teachers are starting to use more project-based assignments rather than written assignments like long essays that they would turn in, that they would write at home. They're requiring students to turn in rough drafts of their work so that there's not this sudden appearance of the finished work, and you don't know how they got there. If they're showing you progress along the way, they're less likely to be able to cheat, I would say. Maybe they're using presentations in class. So, present this topic as if you were presenting to the board of directors of your business, and speak to them in this way. So they have to think about, well, how would I contextualize this for a board of directors, and maybe speak to them differently than I would my friends or the teacher. So that can help to kind of capture the essence of learning. You might grade them on contributions to classroom discussions instead of homework. You can really tell if someone understands what we're covering today if they're able to contribute meaningfully in a back and forth between students, I think. So there are plenty of ways to evaluate students in the age of AI. And certainly education could be fundamentally changed. Like when Susan and I were going to school in high school, we like calculators were a thing, but you weren't allowed to use them in class. But nowadays, calculators are such a given. Like teachers used to say, you're never going to have a calculator with you all the time. And now we all have smartphones that can do that very same thing. So technology advances and education usually advances along with it. And maybe this will take some of the drudgery out of education and allow students to explore things without having to do the whole rote memorization thing that they used to have to do. So it's important, I think, that we find a way to motivate these students and prepare them for a world, the new world that we're living in, where this is another tool that they'll have access to. And they need to know how to use it because it's going to become so integral, probably, to their lives in the future. So we're in this awkward period now where we're trying to kind of combat the risks and evaluate them in the old-fashioned way, when we should be probably looking ahead and thinking, how can we use this as a tool and teach them in a new way, where they aren't being viewed as the adversary that's cheating, but the people that are learning in a new way. So those are some of the risks, I think, to keep in mind as you're looking at ChatGPT and other AI systems. There are many more, but these are some of the few. So obviously there's a lot here to unpack. We have the great social benefits that Susan was talking about, in scientific discoveries and medical advances and that sort of thing. the way it can improve our everyday lives through cooking or summarizing things or writing lists. But it's balanced to some extent by, if we don't kind of monitor the situation, these systems might kind of have unintended consequences. So we welcome any questions you might have. Susan, do you have anything you want to add before we get into it?
I do not. I just want to thank everyone for coming. Feel free to, if you have any questions or comments, if you want to start a conversation. I know we ran very long tonight. It was a very intense topic, but feel free to unmic yourself and ask away, or you can enter any questions you might have in chat as well. I'm not hearing any questions. So if there aren't any questions, I think we both want to thank you for coming tonight, and hopefully you've picked up a few tidbits of information about ChatGPT, and we will hopefully see you around the library soon.
Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.